In Pokemon Sun and Moon, it is buffs galore for existing Pokemon from older generations, and we got some pretty crazy stuff to talk about. So this video will be about the first generation Pokemon that receive buffs in the 7th generation. So Dodrio is going to be the one we are starting off with, because these are some ridiculous changes right here. Swords Dance, Jump Kick, added to Dodrio's moveset, and we also have it to where it does gain plus 10 to its speed. Now, Dodrio already has a 100 base speed, so 110 base speed is exceptional. I feel like that 100 used to be a pretty good sweeping average, but now so many Pokemon just have a 100 base speed that giving it that 110 gives it an edge over all those Pokemon. So now, for example, you outspeed Mega Kangaskhan and then you jump kick it. So adding fighting coverage is kind of what Dodrio needed, even though it didn't really seem like it. Like, alright, now we have good coverage, really high base power on that jump kick as well for not too much of an accuracy drop, and if we want to set up, we can go for Swords Dance, so that does give us even more options. That now we can Swords Dance into a Drill Peck potentially, instead of worrying about losing a lot of health on that Brave Bird. So however well that first turn goes will determine how the Drill Peck plays out. Then we also have Return for Stab. We can even run some other stuff we want to. We have Baton Pass options now. So Dodrio actually getting pretty crazy. That's why I wanted to go and bring up my how to use video, because Dodrio is actually really strong, but the problem is that 100 speed means you had to Scarf it or else bad things would happen. So now Dodrio gets a few more situations where it does excel in, that as long as you're outspeeding 100 base speed Pokemon, or as long as you're making it to that 110, you can use a Life Orb, and now your Brave Bird is doing more damage than a Talonflame. So Dodrio has higher KO potential than a Talonflame, because 110 base attack using Brave Bird is nuts. Then you also keep on with the other coverage and stuff from the jump kick and the potential double edge. So that's why I was just looking right here. Anything else we got doesn't really show. Now we can also add on the quick attack. By removing that Scarf, we do have a couple of options. So depending on what we're running on Dodrio, say item, Life Orb, and then whatever you want to run, I think the Jump Kick Drill Peck does just fine on that Swords Dance, and then Baton Pass, or even the Quick Attack. Quick Attack means if we didn't get the KO and we find a way to survive, we can pick that off. Or if there's a faster Pokemon that is weakened, 100 base attack or 110 base attack, Life Orb, Stab, Quick Attack isn't the worst thing ever. And as for the abilities, unfortunately we don't really have much. Evasion's doubled as long as it's confused. I mean, that could be pretty niche. Early Bird. Early Bird means that the sleep counter ticks faster, but we're not using Rest because Dodrio isn't really that tanky of a Pokemon. So Early Bird, just in case you go up against like a Hypnosis or a Spore strat, but actually that could work against Pokemon like Amoonguss. If they do like survive your hit or something, then try to put you down, you have a better chance of waking up, so that could work. Or the Tangled Feet, because confusion can happen. So it's your personal preference as to what you think you're going to be encountering, but Dodrio, it can do more now, and we might actually see it for once instead of never seeing it ever. So that's something to consider with the Dodrio. Next up we have Arbok. Arbok not getting a substantial change, but it is getting plus 10 to its attack, so now it will have a 95 base attack in Pokemon Sun and Moon, and that means we just get a little bit more damage, which is nice because Arbok goes for Coil, so we can either go less offensive investment and still get the same amount of damage currently, or we get a bigger snowball off of the Coil. It means you can run slightly tankier or have damage, or just also run it naturally. I do see some really interesting sets on the Arbok, and now your Gunk Shot is going to sting just a little bit more if you want to go and throw it out there with whatever else is backing that Arbok. Dodrio, interestingly enough, gets a substantial buff, plus 20 to its attacks. So now Dodrio has a 100 base attack and 120 speed. Not insane, like 100 attack isn't going to go KOing fools all day long, but it is still something pretty nice to consider, especially when you think, alright, this Pokemon is going to be able to go for that Hone Claws, and there are some really weird trappy setups that we see. You know, you go for the Arena Trap on a Truant Pokemon. I think that was like the Durant strategy. That's like, alright, Entrainment Durant, then you have the red card, so you get switched down to Dodrio, and then you can Hone Claws to infinity and beyond. With this, just slightly more damage, or also it might make Dodrio usable in doubles, that you're added on damage. Dodrio's fast. It can bring a really fast flinch on a Rock Slide, or it can bring just solid damage on that base power from the Earthquake. So with this, just more damage overall means Dodrio might have something other than gimmicks to work with. Electrode gets a buff to its speed in Pokemon Sun and Moon. You're like, yeah, Electrode, it needs like a 100, 110 special attack, right? No, it has a 150 speed now. So it goes from 140 speed to 150. I feel like a lot of people would think that that is pretty useless. However, this is actually one of the most interesting, well thought out things I have ever seen from Game Freak. Like, okay, you make the fastest Pokemon faster, that sounds dumb. Except when we actually look at the speed tiers and stuff, Electrode is sitting at 10th place already. So why would you buff the speed of the 10th fastest Pokemon? Well, because of the new Mega system. That Megas will apply their new speed for the start of the turn instead of the next turn. So that means now Electrode outspeeds Mega Sceptile and Mega Beedrill. Therefore, it's technically a buff against these Pokemon. And while it doesn't help too much because Sceptile does have the Lightning Rod, if you have like Hidden Power Ice, I guess it means something. It's just that extra damage. It means now you outspeed these Pokemon. Also, Excelgor. Excelgor did get a buff because Water Shuriken is now special, so there's a chance of using that. Now, it is priority, so it doesn't really worry about the speed too much, but Electrode at least has more options against these Pokemon, and now against Aerodactyl. Mega Aerodactyl will speed tie on that turn, same with the Alakazam. So what it means is that Electrode isn't getting nerfed. That Electrode used to just be able to outspeed the Mega Aerodactyl on that first turn and then Thunderbolt it into oblivion, but now there's like a chance for either side because Mega Aerodactyl is still a Mega Pokemon that isn't super strong, and Electrode is just a Pokemon that isn't used that often. But I think when you actually look into it, alright, so now Electrode is pushed 3 more into like the 7th through 5th spots or whatever for the fastest Pokemon in the game, and that's actually pretty crazy to think about. So before I first saw it, I thought it was dumb, but it does make a lot of sense. Executor getting a buff to its special defense. So special defense is going to go up by 10 to 75. I guess just kind of on par with Psychic type Pokemon. Psychic type Pokemon tend to have a higher special defense, and maybe I guess if they're doing something with the Alolan Executor, 10 points for free. Not going to argue, it's going to help out this Pokemon no matter how you look at it. So that's pretty good right there. And then we have Farfetch'd. So Farfetch'd getting a weird buff as well, getting plus 25 to its attack stat. So now that means Farfetch'd is going to have a 90 base attack, and that could actually snowball pretty well because Farfetch'd has the Stick. So you give Stick to Farfetch'd, critical hit ratio is raised by 2, which means you can run crit boosting moves. So you go for the Slash, well now it's a stab crit ratio, and you're always going to crit with that Stick, so now it's a 90 base attack crit instead of the 65. Farfetch'd still needs a lot of help. I mean, if you want to Baton Pass into Farfetch'd now, giving it speed, giving it attack will actually make this Pokemon have a higher chance to sweep, and it does have a really nice crit kind of lineup. You can run that Leaf Blade, you can run that Night Slash, and you can actually make something happen with this Pokemon to always crit, so that means you're ignoring defensive buffs, you're getting that extra little bit of damage. If you do have a Swords Dance on top of it or something else going for the Farfetch'd, that works out pretty well. The only issue is speed, but in double battles you have Tailwind, you can maybe do singles, Trick Room, or something like that, or like I said, setting up into a Baton Pass means that you can troll with this Pokemon now in a really interesting gimmick. As for the abilities, Defiant could work, especially if you're running like the doubles Tailwind, that they have an Intimidate Pokemon, you end up with the +1, and then you're always critting, so you're doing more than double damage in the end. Pokemon can't flinch, that helps with Fake Out, or you can run the Keen Eye. So that means if your opponent is minimizing or going for some kind of evasion boosting, you can just go and slap them around with your big stick and do a little better right there. Now, those are just like the straight up stat buffs, but there are some moveset changes as well that we're going to get into. Mankey gets Power Trip. So Power Trip Anger Point seems about right with what Mankey is going to be capable of. So whenever you take a critical hit, your attack is raised to +6, so it gets maxed out no matter where you lie, and then that means it is just going to be a buff for the Primeape. So what happens with Power Trip is that this is a new move in Pokemon Sun and Moon. It's pretty much think stored power, but physically. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't get stabbed because it is a Dart type move. That's still going to be a lot of base power on that added onto that move in just one turn. So you have a 140 base power move now, and then you also have max attack. So now, doubles Anger Point strategies do have something to do with that Power Trip, and it's not in Pokemon Showdown now because it is a 7th generation move. But there we go. Also, Marowak gets a really interesting one. Stomping Tantrum. If your previous turn fails, then that means you do also get something that has a 150 base power on that ground type stab. So that's a ton of damage right there. Not many things are going to be able to survive it. However, I don't think, unless you're going for like a very specific strategy, because I thought that Marowak got Fissure, but it doesn't. So if a power, like, we need a Stomping Tantrum Pokemon to get access to that Fissure, because Fissure doesn't miss, it fails. So you throw out the Fissure, fails, and then you have a backup strategy that KOs the Pokemon anyway. But other than that, Stomping Tantrum, unless you are playing for that gimmick, doesn't really work out in my opinion, because you could just go 75-75, because it requires your previous turn to fail. So you have to do nothing to then turn around and make up for it. So at least it's a backup strat, when if you did double Earthquake, you'd be doing more damage in 2 turns, instead of that big nuke after the 1 turn. So it could work in like some really weird scenarios. I feel like there's gonna be some strategies as we figure out all of the Pokemon that are getting Stomping Tantrum. So I haven't looked into it enough right now, but it is something to be aware of the Marowak and some other Pokemon in other generations. And the last thing I wanted to check for the first generation is that Leech Life gets a massive buff in the 7th generation, that it goes from 20 base power to 80 base power, and it keeps the healing effect. So that's gonna be pretty nice. I want to see what first generation Pokemon got access to it. Venomoth Special Attacker, Golbat and Crobat might make slight use of it, but Parasect is a big one, because if we go into the Parasect, it can Swords Dance. So I guess you could Swords Dance tank with Spore. Yo, like there we go. You run Spore, you run Swords Dance, and then you also get the Leech Life and you get some health back. So that might actually work out in the end. And I did want to check out some Guts Pokemon, because Raticate and Machamp also getting buffed from the first generation and the 7th generation, since burn damage is now halved. So at the end turn, burn used to do an 1/8 in the 6th generation. 7th generation is doing 1/16. So a little bit more staying power on the Guts or Pokemon doing that. Also, when it comes to some other move buffs, we have Clefairy with Spotlight. That's actually going to be really interesting. It goes from either a Follow Me Pokemon to a Spotlight Pokemon, and then we can see after that, Clefable's going to get it. Starmie actually getting access to this, and then it will be other Pokemon like Spinda. So that could work in free-for-all battles or the Battle Royale. I think Battle Royale is going to be really interesting. You Spotlight the opponent, and then they get absolutely ruined unless they're going for like a Protector or something. So I think those are things to consider right there, and that is pretty much it for the video right now. So the first generation Pokemon getting buffed, we might see them at least a little bit more, or sometimes they might just take over. Like, it's gonna be really interesting to see what happens with Dodrio. So if you guys enjoy the video, hope you all have a nice day. Thank you very much for watching.